Welcome to Deep Dive, a podcast brought to you by National Defense Lab. At National Defense Lab, we are at the forefront of innovative technologies and strategies to safeguard our nation and its people.
Episode 91, The Rising Threat of Chinese Influence, Digital Warfare, and National Security, a review of the Biden administration's strategic implementation plan for countering domestic terrorism.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really close look at the threats facing the U.S. in 2025.
That's right. We've got some key documents to guide us.
We do. The main ones are the Unclassified 2025 Annual Threat Assessment, the ATA, from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
And also that interesting white paper from the National Defense Lab.
Exactly. The one looking at the Biden administration's plan for countering domestic terrorism.
Right. So our aim today is really to pull out the crucial insights from both.
Yeah, to give you, the learner, a solid grasp of how these, complex challenges fit together and what they mean for national security, without getting lost in the weeds.
Precisely. We'll be looking at threats from, the usual state actors, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, but also the dangers from various non-state groups.
And the white paper adds another layer, doesn't it, about how internal U.S. dynamics might be, exploited by these adversaries.
It does. It suggests a connection there. So it's definitely a multifaceted picture we're trying to clarify.
Okay, let's start with that interconnected threat landscape then. The ATA is pretty clear both state and non-state actors pose immediate threats.
To the homeland, U.S. interests abroad. It's broad.
And focusing on the non-state side for a second, you've got the transnational criminal organizations, the TCOs.
Heavy hitters in drug trafficking. That fentanyl crisis figure you mentioned earlier, over 52,000 deaths, it's just staggering.
It really is. And they're also involved in human trafficking and, increasingly, cyber operations, too.
Plus, we still have terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda on the radar. They remain significant threats.
So what the white paper brings into focus, interestingly, is the interaction here.
Exactly. It argues that certain internal vulnerabilities in the U.S.,
which it connects to specific administration policies on domestic terrorism, the economy, border security.
Right. It suggests those vulnerabilities are being actively looked at and potentially exploited by foreign adversaries.
And the ATA echoes some of those vulnerability concerns, too. It also really highlights the growing cooperation between the big state adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea.
Yeah, that cooperation seems to be deepening. And that naturally increases their collective threat potential, doesn't it?
It must. Makes the whole situation more complex.
Indeed. As they align more, even on specific issues, their combined impact definitely grows.
All right, let's zero in on those major state actors then. Starting with China, the ATA uses strong language here, calling China the most comprehensive and robust military threat, full spectrum warfare capability.
That's a major statement.
Yeah.
And their military modernization backs it up. It's happening fast.
What kind of specifics does the ATA mention?
Well, things like the PLA Navy's third aircraft carrier starting sea trials, advanced missiles like the DF-27.
That's the one with potential hypersonic capabilities, right? Yeah. Super fast, hard to track.
Exactly. And advanced rocket systems like the PCH-191. These aren't minor upgrades. They significantly boost power projection.
And it's not just conventional military stuff. Their cyber capabilities are labeled formidable.
Used for espionage, sure, but also potentially for attacks on critical U.S. infrastructure. They mentioned specific groups like Volt Typhoon and Sol Typhoon.
And the context for all this. Taiwan looms large, obviously, the pressure China's exerting there.
Absolutely. A conflict there would be catastrophic globally. Think about trade disruptions, semiconductor supply chains.
Critical tech. The ATA also talks about China's economic strategy state-directed, aiming for market dominance.
And using economic coercion, like those export restrictions on critical materials they imposed.
Right, the rare earths, but also gallium, germanium, antimony now. That gives them real leverage.
And they're pushing hard to be an S&T superpower, AI, biotech, quantum semiconductors.
With the ATA noting that sometimes involves, let's say, acquiring intellectual property?
A diplomatic way of putting it.
Yeah.
Plus, modernizing their nuclear forces and expanding in space, including counterspace weapons. It's a very broad push.
Okay, let's shift to Russia. The ATA sees the Ukraine war as essentially a proxy conflict with the West.
And despite the huge costs, Russia's showing resilience, thanks in part to support from China, Iran, North Korea.
But even with the focus on Ukraine, the ATA says Russia remains a major threat because of its other capabilities.
Definitely. Nuclear deterrent, obviously, but also counterspace tech, undersea warfare assets. These are enduring threats.
And they're learning and adapting in Ukraine too, aren't they? Using electronic warfare, drones.
They are, improving tactics. And they still have long-range precision strike capabilities that could, theoretically, reach the U.S. homeland.
Plus the ongoing cyber threat. Integrating cyber with military apps seems to be standard practice for them now.
And don't forget the malign influence campaigns. Trying to sow discord in the West, undermine support for Ukraine. That hasn't stopped.
But the report mentioned something specific about a new satellite, too.
Yes, developing a new satellite potentially equipped with a nuclear anti-satellite capability, which is obviously very alarming.
Very. Okay, Iran. The ATA points to their missile program, their nuclear ambitions, and that network of regional proxies, the axis of resistance.
All tools to boost their influence, counter Israel, and pressure the U.S. to leave the region. That's the core strategy.
And they're getting better tech, more lethal missiles, UAVs.
Yes, development continues there. And their cyber operations are getting more aggressive, more sophisticated.
Malign influence, too, even targeting former U.S. officials, the report says.
That's right. And they're building closer ties with Russia and China, creating this sort of interconnected challenge.
The ATA also mentions continued R&D on chemical and biological agents for Iran.
A persistent concern, yes.
And finally, North Korea. Kim Jong-un still focused on strategic and conventional weapons targeting the U.S. and allies.
Very much so. And the key development there is the strengthened partnership with Russia.
What does that partnership give North Korea?
Financial help, diplomatic cover, defense cooperation. There's even talk potentially of North Korean troops going to Ukraine.
Wow. And denuclearization is clearly off the table.
Completely. He's increasing the nuclear stockpile, advancing missile tech, hypersonics are mentioned there too, plus the usual aggressive rhetoric and actions.
And funding it all through illicit means, like cryptocurrency theft.
Yep. And they still maintain chemical and biological weapons capabilities. The worry now is they might get advanced technical know-how from Russia in return for sending munitions.
So stepping back, the ATA really stresses this growing cooperation among these four adversaries.
It's accelerating, particularly since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Mainly bilateral deals, security and defense focused.
China playing a key role supporting Russia economically.
Exactly. And Iran and North Korea supplying Russia militarily. It all adds up, increasing the collecting threat they pose. Joint exercises, economic lifelines, weapons transfers. It makes them individually and collectively stronger challengers.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit to digital warfare and influence operations. Both the ATA and the white paper have a lot to say here.
They do. The white paper really zeroes in on China's use of platforms like TikTok and RedNote for what it calls cognitive warfare.
Trying to shape how people think. Promote pro-China views. You mentioned that Rutgers study earlier.
Right, showing heavy TikTok users had a 50% increase in pro-China attitudes. It suggests these platforms can have a real impact.
And the methods are getting more sophisticated algorithms, fake accounts, AI like deepfakes.
All used to push disinformation. The ODNI flagged concerns about TikTok's potential influence during elections, too. It's a serious concern for democratic processes.
Russia's still active in this space, too, right? The ATA mentions they see influencing U.S. elections as beneficial.
They do. Using entities like the Social Design Agency, RT, it's about undermining trust in the system, amplifying divisions.
And Iran. They seem to be combining influence ops with cyber attacks.
Yes, the report mentions an IRGC actor compromising an email account linked to a former Trump campaign associate. It shows that blend of tactics.
It feels like AI is becoming central to all this, both for carrying out these campaigns and for defending against them.
Absolutely. The white paper mentions Project Athena at the National Defense Lab, using things like natural language processing and deepfake detection. AI is crucial for defenses now.
For finding threats in real time, predicting moves, monitoring this stuff.
Exactly. It's an essential tool in the kit.
Now, the white paper also brings up border security and economic issues, framing them as vulnerabilities.
Yes, it argues that the administration's border policies led to a surge in illegal crossings, which strains resources.
And creates opportunities for criminal groups, like cartels smuggling fentanyl.
Right. It also raises concerns about potential terrorist infiltration through the border, citing apprehensions of people on watch lists.
And on the economic side.
The argument in the paper is that things like inflation and the rising cost of living weaken stability, and that the costs associated with illegal immigration, it cites a fair estimate of $151 billion annually add to the taxpayer burden.
Okay. Then there's a section on domestic terrorism and social unrest. This is where the white paper gets quite critical of the administration's approach.
It does. It contends the domestic terrorism label has been potentially weaponized against political dissenters, raising civil liberties questions.
It also points to what it sees as a permissive approach towards groups like Antifa and BLM during the 2020 unrest.
Citing the large insurance costs from damages during those riots, over $2 billion.
And it expresses concern about a potential, quote, secret plan to limit Second Amendment rights disguised as counterterrorism, mentioning things like red flag laws and assault weapons bans found in some documents.
The conclusion drawn in the white paper is that this approach risks eroding constitutional freedoms and increases political polarization.
The paper also dedicates significant space to what it calls China's strategic infiltration, beyond the military and cyber threats we discussed.
Right, focusing on soft power tactics, using digital platforms like TikTok again, influence in education through things like Confucius Institutes, and sometimes undisclosed funding.
Shaping Hollywood content for market access.
That's mentioned too. Along with corporate influence, buying U.S. agricultural land, and influencing sports and cultural institutions, it paints a picture of very broad, subtle influence efforts.
And reinforces the cybersecurity and IP theft threat, citing an FBI statistic linking, 60% of IP theft cases to China?
A very high percentage, yes.
Finally, the white paper loops back to the importance of AI and cybersecurity for defense.
Correct. Reiterating that AI and machine learning are vital for countering these digital threats, real-time detection, predictive analysis, better monitoring.
Project Athena comes up again as an example of AI-driven counterterrorism tools.
Yes, using NLP, deepfake detection, sentiment analysis. It also stresses integrating AI into broader cybersecurity measures, automated responses, finding anomalies, better encryption.
And briefly touches on the ethical side too, privacy, bias, the need for international cooperation.
Important considerations as these powerful technologies become more central.
So wrapping this deep dive up, it's clear we're facing a really complex, interconnected web of threats.
Definitely. State actors with advanced military and cyber power, non-state actors exploiting seams, pervasive influence operations.
It really demands a comprehensive, adaptive response, doesn't it? You can't just focus on one piece.
Not at all. And we see how they feed into each other. A cyber attack could cause disruption, which could fuel unrest, which could be amplified by foreign disinformation. It's all linked.
Which leads to a kind of provocative thought for our listeners, maybe. Considering how fast digital tech is evolving and how sophisticated these influence ops are becoming.
Yeah. How do we as individuals, as institutions, build resilience against these subtle but really powerful threats? Threats to security, but also to democratic values.
And what role do the tech platforms themselves play, or what role should they play in this whole changing landscape?
Those are definitely the big questions to wrestle with. Continuous learning, adaptation. It's necessary for everyone, not just governments.
Absolutely. Well, for anyone wanting to dig deeper into these issues, read the full white paper and explore more details.
You should visit nationaldefenselab.com.
It's nationaldefenselab.com. Lots of resources there to continue your own exploration. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.
And another episode of Deep Dive brought to you by National Defense Lab. For more information about this topic and others, please visit our Deep Dive podcast page on nationaldefenselab.com. Thank you for listening.